Hi, this is Matt from Rogue Reset. Today is day number 1 on my chest freezer cold plunge build. I'm using a Frigidaire 14.8 cubic foot freezer with a white enamel interior. The dimensions, it's 56 inches long, 27.5 inches wide, and 32.5 inches from the floor to the top of the chest. It draws 1.35 amps, 115 volts, and 60 hertz. Prior to having anything done, I had a licensed electrician hook up a 4-prong GFCI outlet. I've done a couple of weeks of research prior to all this, so I recommend John Richter's book and the Facebook group that corresponds with the book. My plan for today will be to lightly sand the interior of the chest, roughing up the finish with 60 grit sanding sponges. I'll be using JB Water Weld for all of the seams, and I'll clean in between with acetone. I'm gonna time lapse this, and I'm gonna hope this all turns out well. So, as I've been sanding, I've taken off a very top layer, just scratching the surface of the interior enamel. I did notice that there's a bead of some silicone caulk along the bottom seam here. So I think I'm going to pose a question to the group on Facebook and ask if I should remove that silicone or if I should JB water weld right over it. But that's an obstacle I haven't anticipated yet, so I'm gonna wait and see what the consensus is on removing the silicone. Be back. So I've been sanding for about 20 minutes now. I'm using the 60 grit sanding sponge, which seems to be working well. There's a lot of superficial coating coming off. It's all over my hands. I'm using a horizontal and vertical pattern, trying to make kind of a crisscross pattern on the top of the enamel, so the pond shield will have something to bond to. So as I've been sanding for about 25 minutes now, I've noticed that the sanding sponges tend to accumulate the top layer of dust. So every so often I'll go out and kind of bang them off like that, kind of old school style like you did with erasers in school. And then after I use one block, I'll go back over it again with a fresh one just to make sure I've scratched that surface enough. As I was sanding, I noticed that there was a lot of dust developing in the air from all the sanding. So what I'm going to opt for as I move forward is our respirator. I don't know what's in the top coat of the enamel, but I don't want it in my lungs either way, so I'm going to wear a respirator. If you don't have one, I'm sure a mask or even any kind of face covering will do. But moving forward, that's what I'm going to use for sanding. As I've been sanding, the silicone caulking here on the inside corner of the tank, the front of the freezer. I was gonna actually post a question to the Facebook group, but as I've been sanding, this stuff just kind of comes right off. As I sanded, you can just remove it with your finger, which I'll do because it comes off real easily, and I'll just put the JB water weld on that seam. Round number 1 of sanding is all done. It took me about 35-40 minutes to sand, roughly sand the inside. The bottom perimeter did have a bead of silicone caulk all the way around. I thought it was just in the front. But as I sanded, I was just able to kind of scrape my finger along and get all that stuff off. So right now I'm gonna use a soft brush attachment for my shop vac, and I'm gonna vacuum out the dust and then do round 2 with a new sanding sponge. Another advantage of using the sanding sponge as opposed to a piece of sandpaper or an orbital sander is that you can control the pressure to the top coat so you don't sand through the enamel. And it also allows you to form the sponge to the internal curvature of the corners. It fits right in there and you can just sand. So it works out really well. Additionally, I've used an old toothbrush to remove some of the silicone that has been laid in the bottom seam there. Initially, I scraped it with my finger. I was able to get more off with the toothbrush and it doesn't damage the paint. Okay, now that everything's sanded, my next step is to clean up the dust. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna vacuum again using the soft brush attachment from my shop vac. Then I'm going to clean with acetone with a microfiber cloth, some gloves, and my respirator. Then I'll let that dry and I will tackle the JB water weld next. Hi, it's Matt from Rogue Reset. Today's day number 2 of my cold plunge build. My plan for today is to apply JB water weld on all the seams and show you actually how to mix it up and knead it. There's actually 2 different colors in here. It's a solid tube of epoxy. So I'll be using some gloves and follow the mixing instructions and go from there. Add that amount of the JB water weld onto my first seam. It's a little hard to work with because it's so sticky. It doesn't smell great either, but I used about a ½ inch of the tube and have kneaded it and rolled it up so it was uniform in color, and then applied it and tried to smooth out the edges. It doesn't look pretty right now, but I'm sure I'll get a hang of it. So here's the actual mixing process of the JB water weld. You unpeel a little bit of this liner, this clear plastic liner. Break off about a ½ inch or so of the tube. Cover it back out so it doesn't cover it back up so it doesn't dry out. Now with this little piece here, I'm just gonna pinch it and then fold it in onto itself multiple times. You want it to be a uniform color before applying it. And this takes about 30 seconds to a minute to get mixed well. Roll it around a little bit. I have had to change my gloves once already just because this does get so sticky. So if you have multiple pairs of gloves, that's good. So after this is mixed, I'm going to turn it into a little bit of a snake. Apply it right onto the seam. And kind of tap and press as you go. I'm trying to kind of feather the edges here so water doesn't get under the seam. It looks like the first piece I put on is actually already setting up. And I've actually found this old wallpaper roller, and it seems to actually work pretty good. So if I just roll the seam a little bit, really get it in there, and then tap and press. Try to make it look all uniform. And I did use a straight edge here too and push the borders up a little just so it looks aesthetically better. And I actually started on the top where probably the water won't be as much. In case I mess up, then I can just easily fix that. So it's gonna be a little bit of a trial and error at this point. I'll do a little bit and see how it sets up, and then I'll come back and do some more. So far, I've sealed the seams for a lot of it so far. And I did realize a little trick here. If you're using gloves, which you should be for mixing the JB water weld, I will use the gloves, and then once it gets too tacky to apply the JB water weld, I'll take the glove off, I'll let that set, and then I'll reuse them and just use the other side of the glove just to conserve on your gloves a little bit. And this whole thing so far has taken me probably about 4 hours to seal. And I still have quite a bit to do. My plan for today for my cold plunge is to apply Pond Shield. I'll show you the preparation process. So far I have sanded, used JB water weld on all the seams, wiped it down with acetone, resanded, and cleaned with acetone again. I'm gonna prep the outside with some frog tape and some paper, and then I will show the mixing process of the the Pond Shield, and we'll get it applied. Here's my preparation for the Pond Shield: respirator, gloves, a pan, microfiber roller that I've already washed and it's dried for a couple of days, mixing containers, paddle mixer for my drill. I got the Pond Shield hardener, color, it's sky blue. I have some self-etching primer that there's a couple of spots I'm just gonna hit really quick, and some denatured alcohol to cut the Pond Shield. And we'll see how it goes. Woo! Okay, for my Pond Shield, what I'm going to do, it's a 2-to-1 ratio of color, 2 parts color to 1 part hardener with denatured alcohol, which I'm using to thin it. So I'm gonna use 1 cup of the blue, half a cup, which is 8 ounces, 4 ounces, half a cup of the hardener, and then a half a tablespoon of denatured alcohol to thin it out, and I'll show you that process. I will mix it for, recommended mixing time is about 2 minutes, but on the Facebook group it's recommended to do 5. So I'll mix it for 5 minutes with my paddle in reverse as to not pull any air into the mixture. Okay, I've done 2 coats of Pond Shield so far. Get covered fairly well. It's still wet and glistening. Covered well. I'm not sure if I'll have to add another coat or not. I'll have to reassess, but I don't really have a lot of paint left. So. to date for my chest freezer cold plunge build, I've used Pond Shield to paint the inside. I started with competition blue and ended up buying another quart, which was sky blue. So I mixed it so it's actually a custom blue color, covered well, everything's sealed. I sealed the drain. I created a decorative wall just so it looks a little more spa-like. And I just ordered some matte black wrap that I'm gonna wrap this thing in. And I'll throw in some supports for the bottom and hook up my ozone generator, filter, and pump. Okay, here's my current setup. I'm using an ozone generator to keep that water clean. Everything's running on an Inkbird timer, which is actually a little bit warmer than it's set at, but that's okay since this is my first plunge in a couple of months. Everything is running off of a timer for the ozone generator, which I have running from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. And then have the ozone generator and the Inkbird through the top of the tank running into here. So, about to take the plunge.